I'd like to welcome everybody to the Southeastern RAC. Sorry, let me get my notes in front of me. Regional Advisory Council meeting. This meeting is being held in person in Green River, Utah, and it's also being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. We all have ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife. It's why we're here today. We encourage those who want to express their opinion to fill out a comment card. Comments at today's meeting should be focused on topics listed in the agenda. Unrelated comments will not be heard today and should be sent directly to the DWR or RAC and board members for consideration at another time. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with their own. Respectful behavior facilitates efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented. Disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated, and those who engage in it will be asked to leave. Lastly, please help reduce distractions during the meeting by putting your phone on silent, and if you need to take a call, we ask that you step outside. We'll want to do some RAC. We'll introduce our RAC members. First, we'll start with those who are here in person, and then we'll jump. It looks like we have several online. We'll jump to them. Let's go ahead and you, Matt.
Matt Farnsworth, representing Sportsman.
Trish Hedin, elected official.
Cash Stallings, representing public at large.
Brad Richmond, non-consumptive.
Okay, let's go online. We'll start with Daniel, then go to Jake, then Charlie, then Steve.
Yeah, Daniel Luke, representing the Forest Service.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not there in person. We have some meetings up in Salt Lake, but I'm Jake Palma, representing BLM.
Charlie Fisher, representing Sportsman. Again, sorry I'm not there in person.
I'm Stephen Duke. I'm in Monticello and I'm representing Sportsman.
Awesome, thanks. And we'd also like to recognize those members of our wildlife board that we have. Looks like we have Bob Christensen online, and we also have Ken Johnson here in the audience with us. My name is Scoop Flannery, and I'm the RAC chair and represent Sportsman. And we got Chris here too. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Chris Wood. I'm the regional supervisor for the Southeastern region.
Okay, for the first item on the agenda, look to hear a motion to approve the agenda and minutes.
I move to approve the agenda and the minutes.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Steve said aye. I can't tell with Daniel and Jake and Charlie.
Aye.
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 That was three of them. All right. It's unanimous. All right. We'll move on to a wildlife board meeting update. So this is from the January wildlife board meeting. The first motion. Sorry, let me go down here. So the first, starting this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first motion was to look at separating bobcat licenses from fur bearer requirements, and it passed unanimously as presented. The next one is regarding the Utah black bear recommendations, and the motion passed 5-1 as presented. sorry, not as presented with 10 additional tags, and that was the bear tags on the LaSalle, I believe. So that's right. The next one is for the Predator Control Incentive, Rule R 657-64. And this one passed unanimously as presented. The next was for cooperative agreements for big game or turkey rule. And there was a motion to pass the rule, and it's Rule R 657-74. That passed as presented unanimously. And then, let's see here. There was a board appeal. Yeah, there was a board appeal that passed unanimously. Okay, so we'll move down into the first item that we have on the agenda is, or sorry. Oh yeah, sorry, this isn't on the agenda, but we're gonna have Chris give a regional update for this Southeast region.
I can just talk to, maybe one thing I'll say is that, as you know, we've been holding mule deer meetings throughout the region and throughout the state. We've been holding them in Price and also in the southern part of our region. We held one in Monticello and then also one in Blanding. We did those last year in August and then again November. And as part of that, thank you. As part of that, we're going to continue to have them this year as well. And we thought it would be great for our next mule deer meeting to get out on the ground and see some project sites, talk about some highway issues, look at some habitat work, both what's been done, what's being proposed. And so that's coming up in May. It's on the slide here in a minute, but on May 12th, we'll be meeting in Monticello. And then on May 14th, we'll be meeting in Price. We'll be meeting at 5:30. We'll send out emails to everyone who's attended those meetings and also to the RAC as well, and to invite you. But we'd love to have your participation. One thing that's good is we've already heard back from some of our partners, and they plan on attending as well. Partners being the Forest Service, the BLM, State Lands, UDOT. They haven't been able to attend in the past. If you remember last November when we had these meetings, it was right at the time when the federal government shut down. And so they weren't able to attend, but we've reached out to them already and they've expressed that they're able to come. So that'd be great to have them there. And we hope that all those who have come to the meetings in the past will be able to join us. We're going to serve dinner. So the idea is to get out on the ground, have some burgers with the biologists, and learn about things that we're doing, and also get ideas from you and from the public about what more we can do in those areas, and just generate some ideas and brainstorm and together continue to help the mule deer populations. Our aquatic biologists have been pretty busy. They've been monitoring the Colorado for AIS. They've also been doing some surveys in the Santa Fe River and in the tributaries in the Santa Fe, looking for the 3 species. And then, of course, it's really warm and it was a really dry winter. And so some of the fisheries that usually open up a little later are opened up and fishable, and some have been stocked. And so fishing season started a little early this year. Our habitat section presented projects to the sportsman groups about 2 weeks ago. The sportsman groups together committed over $6.6 million towards habitat restoration. With these conservation permit dollars that go back onto the ground, our biologists and our partners are able to do incredible things in the state for Utah, both in habitat projects and research and transplants. Those types of projects all get funded by these dollars. Law enforcement's been busy as well. They, of course, right now it's a limited entry turkey hunt. The youth hunt starts a week from Saturday, and then, or maybe Friday, maybe is it? And then the following, after 3 days, then the general season turkey hunt opens up. We're also trying to fill some vacant positions. I have heard that we're going to get a officer down in Monticello in the next sometime this year. So that's exciting. And then we have an event coming up this Saturday, I believe, is the 25th. It's called Fish with a Biologist at Recapture Reservoir. So Calvin Black is our sport fish biologist. He's phenomenal at fishing too. And so what a great opportunity to hang out with Calvin, learn about recapture and the things that are going on there, and learn how to fish that reservoir. So I encourage you to sign up or attend that event. I think there's some flyers here on the table for that. Our wildlife section has been doing pinyon jay surveys and sage grouse surveys. And then we also want to remind you that the big game application period is open and it closes on April 23rd, which is this week, isn't it? Tomorrow. It closes tomorrow. And then I mentioned the mule deer meetings earlier. So we encourage you to attend those as we're excited for that opportunity. That's all I got. If you have any questions, I can answer that, or we can jump into the meeting. Go for it, Trish.
In the last meeting, we were at another meeting in Green River recently, that with the sage grouse, the let count was down. I think that's what you said. If my memory serves me. You don't have to, but.
Maybe Brad or Wade can answer this question, but yeah, I think, go ahead.
Well, that wasn't actually asking
Okay.
my question. I was interested more in the pinyon jays. If you guys have any findings, some initial findings on those surveys. No. Okay.
Yeah. Josh Fife is our conservation biologist. He's not here tonight, but we're doing a lot of surveys and also some research with habitat work and see how those habitat treatments affect or doesn't affect pinyon jays. And so more to come.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris. We'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is an informational item for big game informational presentation. Mike Wordle, who is the big game program coordinator, the newly minted big game program coordinator.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself briefly. I think I'm kind of a new face into this region. Prior to this position, I was a wildlife biologist in Fillmore, so I covered the Beaver, Pavant, and Oak Creek units. And then before that, I also worked as a private lands coordinator for a couple of years. So happy to be here. Happy to answer any questions about the informational.
Maybe it would be helpful just to remind us all why some of these recommendations are informational only and not action items.
For sure.
And then second, we get a lot of questions, all of us, I'm sure, about how they come up with population estimates. And if you could maybe just give us a little insight on that.
Yeah, you bet. So yeah, this first item is informational because these are the permit numbers that were under a 20% change from the previous year. So when our biologist sits down and sets permit numbers for a unit, if it exceeds a 20% change from the prior year, then those go before the RACs for input and the wildlife board for approval. If it's below that 20% change threshold, that happens automatically, but it still comes forward as an informational. I'll give some background on the information our biologists are looking at when they set those permit numbers, and I'll try to be brief. But we have kind of three main data inputs that go into our population models. So the first is herd composition. So deer, as we know, they're not like mountain goats, right? Mountain goats, we can jump in a helicopter, go fly around the top. They're white, they stick out. We can estimate their populations rather easily. Mule deer, their habitat is very expansive. They cover most of the state. They're very secretive. They live in the trees. We can't just count them from a helicopter. So we use population modeling and statistics to estimate their populations. And we have three main data inputs that go into that. The first input is our herd composition. So that's the buck-doe ratio and fawn-doe ratio. That you're all familiar with those terms. That's done in November and December. Our biologists are out during the rut. And what they're trying to do, if you think of a deer herd like a pie graph, right? And this pie graph represents your deer population. you're wanting to know what percentage of that population are does, what percentage are bucks, and what percentage are fawns. And so when we go out, we're counting, well, how many does do I count? How many bucks? How many fawns? It's not a census count. We're not trying to count every deer on the mountain. We're simply trying to get at what do those ratios look like. And that's important that we do it in November and December because that's during the rut. They're not sexually segregated. They're condensed on the winter range. The second piece of information that we look at that we have really good data on here in Utah, we're pretty proud of, is our survival data. So we're capturing deer during the months, usually of November and December, and we're putting GPS collars on these animals. And those collars, they allow us to learn about their movements, but they also allow us to track their survival. So survival is measured from December to December. And when that animal dies, our biologists get a notification. They go in and hike into the location, figure out what killed it. But at the end of that December year, we know what was the survival rate for our adult does, which is one of the biggest drivers of deer populations. So when we talk about buck permits really aren't what's driving a deer population up and down. Adult doe survival does. It's a huge metric in measuring whether your population is declining or increasing. We also collar 6-month-old fawns, and we'll monitor their survival through the next year. The other data input is our harvest data. So if you've hunted, you've had the privilege of filling out a harvest survey, that helps us understand, okay, if we issue this many permits, this is how many bucks are going to be harvested. If we increase those permits, we can estimate that it'll be this amount of bucks, right? All that information goes into a population model. And a population model, it's a big spreadsheet. It looks scary. It's really quite simple. Really what it's doing is it's taking known information, data that you know, which is the buck-doe ratio, survival data, and harvest data, and it's taking that to help you estimate information that you don't know, which is the population estimate. I've heard it compared to like walking into a gas station, you buy a $4 Red Bull and a $2 candy bar, and you walk out and you're like, oh, I have $14 left. Well, you can backtrack and see that, oh, I actually had whatever that is, 20 bucks when I walked in. It works in a similar manner, right? And our model, it works on itself. So the more data that we add, the more years that we use our model, the more accurate that it gets. A lot of these models have been in place since like 2010. And so we actually feel pretty confident in our population models. So from there, our biologists, so we now know our buck-doe ratio, and we have objectives set in a statewide management plan for every individual unit. So a lot of our general season units are either set to manage towards a 15 to 17 bucks per 100 doe ratio or 18 to 20 bucks per 100 doe ratio. So the biologist looks at, okay, where am I at in comparison to my objective? They use that information I talked about before to estimate, okay, next year, if I have good fawn survival or bad fawn survival, and if my adult doe survival is good or bad, how many bucks am I going to have in the population during the start of the hunt? And in order to achieve this buck-doe ratio at the end of the hunt, how many permits do I need to issue? And what does the success rate look like on those permits? So it's kind of in a nutshell. I know it's a lot of information to throw at you, but that's what our biologists are looking at when they set these permits. And this year, a lot of the recommendations came in under that 20% threshold, which is a good sign. That means that we're not seeing a huge drop or a huge change in our deer populations and our buck-doe ratios this past year. It's been fairly stable. We've had good survival with the light winter. So hopefully that helps.
Oh, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Questions for Mike from the RAC?
So I really appreciate that explanation, especially from like a scientific standpoint. So, you know, our biologists have a management plan and a model to work with. I guess one question that I have is for just statewide, was there any type of general messaging from the division to your biologists about, hey, please take this big overarching factor into consideration? And what I mean by that is maybe some social tolerances that the division is trying to manage towards some political concerns, or just overall, hey, we know this has been a problem this last year, so will everyone please have that in their mind as they work through these recommendations? I'm just asking if there was one theme that your biologists were keeping in their mind this last year?
Yeah, I don't know that there necessarily was from the statewide level. I think at the unit level, the biologists understand what's going on at their unit and they take those things into consideration, like social pressures. But really, so like the way the recommendation process happens is our biologist, the individual biologist over their unit sits down, goes through all this data, runs all the numbers, and comes up with a permit number. That then goes through a regional review process where they'll sit down with the regional wildlife manager, regional supervisor. Then it comes to Salt Lake, and there's a process there where I review it along with our big game, whatever Kent's title is now. And then our biometrician, and we go through a big review. And there are times where, and really our role, like my role in that, is to make sure that we're moving towards our objectives, that we're not outside of our statewide management plan. And that's really my whole role. My role is not to come back to a biologist and say, hey, you got to cut tags here, you got to increase tags here. It's to make sure that we're within the sideboards we've promised to manage towards.
Thank you.
This is just more, I'm just interested. In your modeling, do you throw in things like habitat health, climate, or are those things you just correlate later? Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of that's really, it's going to show up in our survival rates. And so it's taken into account, but not directly. Like we're not going out and doing vegetative surveys and including that in the model or anything. We're looking more at like vitality rates of the animal.
Any of the RAC members online have questions? Questions from the audience? Oh, Charles, go ahead.
Hey, I see in your informational, no change to the chronic wasting disease hunt here, on a Moab, Castle Valley. I was just wondering if you have any information on how that hunt went last year and, how people felt about that.
Yeah, I'll let Ian come up and talk about it. He's itching to get up here.
Yeah, Charles, thanks for the question. So the hunts went more or less how I thought they would. It was high success on that Castle Valley hunt, lower success on that Moab hunt. I think the folks who hunted Castle Valley were pretty happy with that. I know they saw a lot of bucks. The ages of harvest kind of ran the gamut. Saw a few really old mature bucks harvested as well as a few younger ones. That Moab hunt is just tough because it's a lot of private, and the bucks that did get killed kind of got killed off the loop road. But we had 11 bucks killed on that Castle Valley hunt and 3 killed on the Moab hunt. And of the 14 total, there were 3 that were CWD positive, which matches up pretty well with what we're seeing from our like or during season sampling efforts. It's about 20% of the samples we take on the unit come back positive for CWD. So our CWD hunts kind of lined up with that, which was good to see. So, even though it was kind of a small portion of bucks that were killed, to have 3 of 14 is of concern. So we wanted to kind of keep that pressure on those hunts. So we recommended keeping them the same, and we'll try another year and see how it goes.
Thank you. Thanks for that update.
Any other questions? Questions from the audience? And any comments on this informational item? Okay, we'll move to agenda item number 5, deer permit recommendations for 2026, and Mike's already up there.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, these are the permits, those permit numbers that were over that 20% threshold. So that's really all I had to add to it.
All right, questions from the RAC?
One of the questions we received was in regards to the Oak Creek unit from the Landowner Association. How does the proposal affect the Landowner Association there?
Indirectly, I mean, an increase in permits eventually gives them an increase in permits to the LOA. I think the LOA, they don't want to see an increase in permits just because they want to see that buck-to ratio remain high. The Oak Creek, it's tough. It's in a unit where, so I used to be the biologist over that unit. We had a big fire in 2012 that changed the summer range, and the deer all of a sudden had a lot more nutrition on the summer range. And we saw a lot of big bucks get killed over the last 10 years. That fire is starting to kind of age out. We're not seeing as many benefits as we did 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. And so I think overall antler quality, there's not as many giants, right? Still a lot of mature bucks. The average age is still over 5 years old. So there's been local pressure to not increase those permits. The reason that we recommended an increase was simply because it was over the buck-to ratio objective.
With the habitat issue or comment that you made there, I know it's under objective on population. Is there a move to lower that population objective, or is the population objective that's current in line with the current range trends?
Yeah. So with the Oak Creek, when we redid the statewide deer management plan, there was actually a lot of discussion about making that into a premium limited entry unit, which would increase the buck-to ratio objective, which would mean we wouldn't be increasing permits here. The committee decided against that. One of the reasons why is the Oak Creek is, like I mentioned, it's nutritionally limited. There's not a lot of resources there. It's a pretty small deer herd. The summer range is pretty good, but it's not expansive. It's really limited. And the winter range, that same fire that improved the summer range, just nuked the winter range and turned all the sagebrush and bitterbrush, cliff rose, all turned to grass. And so there's not a lot of great winter range. And so a lot of those deer are living in alfalfa fields, which is helping them stay alive. But in a nutritionally limited setting, actually carrying more bucks is not good for your herd health and herd productivity, right? So if we want to reach that population objective, we actually having a lower buck-to ratio could help us do that. When I would classify the Pavant versus the Oak Creek, they're right across the freeway from each other. The Oak Creek was typically always have lower Fondo ratio. We picked up a lot more dead deer during the winter on the Oak Creek. So I do think that managing for a higher buck-to ratio is limiting us from maybe reaching that population objective. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and I agree with everything you've said. Maybe clarify a little bit. So the population objective that you guys have set right now, you feel that's in line with current range range conditions and what we'll see going forward?
Yeah, it's hard to know what we'll see going forward, right? With range and everything, but yeah, I think we can get there. And currently the population objective is above, so it's not like it's limiting that population from growing, right? We're not above the objective and issuing doe tags to lower it down or anything like that. So yeah, I think it's fine to be where it's at.
Thank you very much.
I kind of have a question related to both the first subject you had about big game information and also on the deer permit. So correct me if I'm, or kind of, yeah, correct me. So the deer plan that is an every 3-year type plan that it's updated and so forth, is that correct?
So the statewide deer plan is a 6-year plan.
6-year plan.
Yep, it calls for a mid-plan review. So every 3 years it gets reviewed. But the hope is that will just be a review, not a full revision. We're hoping just to find any glaring, like, hey, this was a problem, we got this wrong, let's change it.
So that was implemented 2 years ago, 2024 was the new plan for 6 years.
Yeah.
So just prior to that being implemented, there was a proposed study from the division to do some specific areas and kind of just do some specific studies in certain areas. One that stands out in my mind that I remember was go to like a three-point or better or something to that effect. And at that time, I thought like most of the RAC boards kind of endorsed that. But then when it went to the Wildlife Board, they decided to wait until the new state plan was implemented before they did any more study. And I kind of felt like personally, and it was just a personal thing, that that would have helped them guide their decisions toward the 6-year plan. But regardless of whether it was implemented before or after, since then, I haven't heard anything more about any kind of studies specific to certain areas related to both the permits and the overall plan. So I was just kind of curious if that's gone entirely away or if there's still something possibly proposed that way.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I can give an update on that. So what that research project was looked at, it was proposed to have a couple 3-point or better units. I think they are actually 4-point or better. We had, yeah, and the other thing was restricted weapons. And so the 4-point or better didn't end up going through. We didn't end up doing that. The restricted weapons has been going. And so this past year, so it's the Beaver was split to where it's the Beaver East and the Beaver West. Beaver East kept regular weapons. Beaver West had restricted weapons. The Thousand Lakes is a limited entry unit that has restricted weapons. The Boulder and the Cache unit. We've only got 1 year of data, but the brief update is that it didn't change success rates very much. So it's similar in success. Again, it's 1 year of data. We're doing it for, I believe, 4 years. Does that sound right to you guys? I think that was the duration of that research project, but yeah, we've got 1 year of data. Success rates didn't change a whole lot. Just anecdotally, I know on the Beaver West specifically, I saw more mature bucks in my classification than I normally did. And just hearing from sportsmen, we heard a lot of positive feedback from that hunt. And I heard a lot of stories of guys that were like, I had a mature buck at 300 yards that I normally could have killed, and I didn't. And instead, I ended up shooting a 2-point 2 days later, which was kind of the goal of the hunt, was to let. So I do think that hunters are less selective, and potentially maybe we're allowing more mature bucks to make it through the hunt. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Hey, looking through the packet here, I see you have 55 added tags to the limited entry Book Cliffs deer hunt. What are your biologists seeing within the herd or habitat or on the ground that constitutes that increase?
Brad, do you mind coming and talk about that? Did you hear the question? He's asking about the Book Cliffs, increase on the Book Cliffs. Yeah,
Please repeat the question. I'm sorry. Book Cliffs, Northeast region.
I see Book Cliffs has added 55 tags. Book Cliffs is kind of one that we share with the Northeast region. Wondering what you guys are seeing within the herd and on the ground habitat wise that constitutes that increase.
The main thing was just a climbing buck-tail ratio that, put it out of the range where we need to increase permits there. Survival wise, I'm not on top of that as well as I once was. I don't know.
can get that for you, Brad.
Hey, Brad, I'm online also. I was just looking at some of the numbers. Last year we had about a 40% or a 40 buck to doe ratio, and we're supposed to be 25 to 30. The 3-year average is 39. So we have been raising the last couple of years, and this year was another raise for that purpose. And the survival, we had a pretty good survival year like the rest of the state did. So I think we're in line to raise that up.
Okay, yeah, so it is to realign buck to doe ratios. I know the Book Cliffs is a concern, especially as we've been in such a long drought, in and out of drought periods. The herd is a concern, but like we've talked about before, bucks, the does are really what we're trying to save in herd management. So I guess I can see how that aligns. I just was wondering what the thought process was behind it.
Yep.
Any other questions for the RAC? Questions from the audience? We have any online comments for this?
No online comments, but you all received the survey we put out. We only got one response for the survey for all the questions. And this particular one, the one person somewhat agreed with the recommendation.
And do we have any comment cards?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I guess I don't even know who to ask this to, maybe even to Chris, but does it surprise you that we only get one comment on, I mean, mule deer is what makes people very passionate. Does it surprise the division that we don't get more public comment?
Yeah, I guess I was surprised. And I think this trend is not just in our region, but throughout the state. All regions experience, relatively low number of comments. I don't know. I don't have a great answer for you. Maybe, I don't know if the mule deer meetings are helping and communicating. I'm not sure. Good question. We'll continue to look into that. Of course, we want to make sure that the public is involved in this process, and we welcome their comments, and we hope they feel engaged and continue to be engaged with us. So good observation. We'll work to improve that.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I respond to that? Steve, I'm a county commissioner, and when there's a lot of people at the meetings, we're not doing a very good job. So you can take that for what you will. Can you hear me?
Yeah, explain that to me though.
Meaning they're there to complain. So I
Gotcha.
think if people aren't here to complain, that's a positive.
Thank you.
And I think we used to get a lot more comments back when every single unit was scrutinized and it was all up for changing and adjustments. But with that 20% rule, there's not nearly as many. So we do have a couple comment cards. Any other questions from the RAC or comments before we move on? We'll have comments, right? Yeah. Okay, let's go with Troy Justinson with SFW. And then after that, we'll go with Kevin Albrecht.
Troy Justinson, Sports Fish Wildlife. Trish, that's a good comment. I really never thought of it that way. So that's a good way to look at it. Scoot, I seen kind of a frown come on your face when you heard a CO was moving back to Monticello. You got to change your tactics there, huh?
I was just hoping for a couple days heads up,
Steve, if you want comments, we have a fulfillment committee meeting. It's 19 chapters. We get together to discuss this. You're welcome to come. There's lots of comments. So it's like herding cats. But no, Troy Justin, Sports, Fish and Wildlife, we support the division's recommendations with one exception. And our exception falls within the 20%. I know you can't address it, but our Richfield chapter has a concern with the Monroe fire of what happened to that mountain there. And they're a little bit concerned with the number of permits there. And we just asked that, maybe the board, or if they have the prerogative, could look at that. And they recommended going with 900 instead of the recommended here. But other than that, we support the division's recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Troy. Kevin?
Kevin Albrecht, representing retired RAC members. Listening to Mike talk about the process and where we're at, it was awesome to hear, because so much of the new mule deer plan come from so many ideas from the public, and not one group or not one person. And the division's trying a lot of new things. And I had the opportunity to sit on the last mule deer plan, and I would say that not anyone in that got everything they wanted, and many give up a lot. but this plan is representing, you know, a lot of the new data, a lot of the technology from following the collared deer, and really trying to be leading the West in mule deer management. And it was really interesting to sit back and kind of see that today, and see what direction we're going. Just like Brad had mentioned, you know, the 4-pointer better idea was an idea that was going through. When it went into the committee, there were many that were very concerned with that, and it was an idea that didn't come out the other side. But I'm excited to see with everything that the division is putting into it, where this plan is going, and it has my support also.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, let's go to comments from the RAC.
I got a couple comments. So I guess one thing I would say is, you know, and I voted for it when we did it, whatever that's worth, but I'll just say I love the 20% rule. That was one of the best things we've ever done for mule deer in this state in my entire life, was just follow the science on 20% of them and go for it. Now, having said that, I do want to make a general comment that comes back to my thing. And I know for the division, it's like, you guys can't win. You're getting it from both sides. I get it. So I'm going to give it to you from the other side. I feel like when I looked, and I'm not a biologist, right? I'm just someone giving their one person opinion for whatever that's worth. But I feel like when I looked over the buck to doe ratios that we had across mule deer, whether we were talking general season or limited entry, I felt like the division could have been more aggressive. I felt like, yes, we saw tag increases overall, which I love to see. I love to see that. But I felt like they were a little bit of a conservative number. And that's why I kind of put that question out there to be, were we really worried about the terrible winter and that we might not have that great a feed for the summer? I mean, you know, was there something that made us be so conservative, or, you know, social pressures, political pressures? But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, and I know you got someone on the other side saying the opposite thing, but I would have been happy to see to push it a little bit further on those handing out those tags. I am not a big believer in banking bucks. So if they're there and we can let people get out and hunt, and more families in a hunt group get a tag, then I'm in support of that. Of course, within the parameter sideboards of what we set up in our plan. But, you know, I'm the type of guy that says, let's lean more towards the side where we're going to issue more permits instead of right up the middle. And so that's a comment that I just have overall, is that I think when it came to our limit entry and general season, we could have pushed a few more permits out this year on the majority of our units. So.
Nobody here at the table's lights turning green. So any of you guys online have any comments? Are we really about to finish the tag recommendations this quick? Okay. We'll entertain some motions, or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Second the motion.
We have a motion by Charlie to approve as presented, and a second by Brad. We'll do just a roll call for those here, just by hand. And then those online will ask you to say yay or nay. So first of all, those here, all in favor? We got 4. And then those online, start with Daniel.
Okay.
Jake?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, on to the next item on the agenda, once in a lifetime permit recommendations for 2026. Rusty Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Rusty, I think it would just be good for the general public. You know, you have the bison permits and the booklets. If I have this written down correctly, it went from 49 to 76. So if you can just describe for the general public why that huge jump.
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually, we revised the unit plans. The Book Cliffs unit plan this past summer, and where we split the unit into two different objectives instead of one objective as a whole. And so even though the Bitter Creek, for example, the overall objective for that area was increased, we had a really good flight, and we feel like that population is also growing. And so rather than cut off entirely and wait till we get to that point, we feel like we have the ability to increase permits and still grow slowly. And so that's kind of the tactic the biologist has taken, is let's ease into that population objective and still let people hunt along the way. So.
I tried to find the answer to this myself, and I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. Maybe you can help a little bit with the 10% allocations, especially on once in a lifetime stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I apologize if that's confusing. It seems to be a little confusing for a lot of folks. We looked at this a couple years ago. Actually got a phone call from a non-resident from Connecticut or somewhere, and he said, "Hey, I know I'm a non-resident, and I don't live in Utah, but I'm still a constituent, and I've been applying for 28 years or however long it was, and I don't have a single opportunity for a bonus permit in any of the once in a lifetime species. Everything is one tag, one tag, one tag. So even though I'm max points, it still doesn't, do me a whole lot of good." And I said, I thought about this and I was like, yeah, there's probably some things we could do. And at the same time, we had bison hunts where we had a whole bunch of 5 permit bison hunts. And so 5 rounds to 10. And so we'd offer a non-resident permit on those hunts. And so we were issuing 4 resident tags and 1 non-resident tag. And so we were actually given 20% of our bison permits in a lot of situations. And so I thought there's got to be a better way where we can give a true 10% and also offer as many bonus permit opportunities to non-residents and get them through the pool. And so that was kind of the goal. And so what you'll see is, the Book Cliffs, for example, with the Bitter Creek and the Little Creek South units, there's only 1 hunt that offers non-resident permits. And it's a really high allocation compared to resident permits. It's 8 and 7 on that particular hunt. But the rest of the hunts are 100% resident permits. And so to me, it was a way to look at things a little more holistically, give a true 10% for each species, and give as many bonus permit opportunities to non-residents as we can. So it's a little wonky. It's not, traditionally what we've done, but we felt it was fair on both sides.
Will the units stay consistent for year after year, so they can kind of plan a little bit when they put applications in before the numbers are approved and not end up applying for a unit that has no tags?
Yeah, no, so they don't have to be, we recommend in the fall, we come around with 3-year hunt structure recommendations. And so we like to keep those things the same for 3 years. Although when we passed that, we also passed, there was some concern raised about sheep, for example, or if we have a die-off or something, do we have the ability to change that? And we do have that ability to change that midstream at that fall rack. And you'll likely see a change or two this coming fall, just so as those units ebb and flow, go up and down, we want to offer those non-resident permits on probably the biggest hunts with the most permits, so that we're not leaving residents out in the cold on those where there's just 2 or 3 permits and 1 or 2 of them are going to non-residents. We don't want that. So yeah, as those sheep units especially change over time, we have the ability to go in and change those midstream, and otherwise we'll try to set those on a 3-year cycle. Yeah.
Any of you guys online have questions? Okay, questions from the audience. See none. Do we have any online comments?
No comments, but let me find the results of the survey here. Just one response from the survey, and they somewhat agreed with the recommendation.
And it looks like we have a couple of comment cards. One comment card, Troy Justinson.
Troy Justinson, Sports and Fish and Wildlife. We support the division's recommendations as proposed. I just want to comment on one thing that was discussed quite extensively last night in the Southern RAC, and that is these once-in-a-lifetime archery permits for bison, sheep, and mountain goats. The question was asked, the division, do you manage these once-in-a-lifetime permits for 100% success? And the sentiment of that was, hey, it's once in a lifetime, we should be managing for optimal success. The thing that concerns me is those permits for the bison, the sheep, and the mountain goats for archery only were totally opposite. We are the group that took that through the racks. It took us 3 years to get it through the racks, and it was under the pretense that, hey, you have a chance to jump to the front of the line before guys that have waited 20 some odd years, but this is an opportunity hunt. It's not going to be easy. We wanted those season dates and areas to be extremely difficult so that success was not 100%. And so we're starting to see a lot more people say, hey, wait a minute, time out. They're 100% here. Just put them with the normal draw. If they want to hunt with the bow, they can hunt with the bow. I like these hunts, but I want them, if we're going to lose these hunts, they need to go back to what they originally designed for. Put them at the not most opportune time to where guys are struggled. That it's an opportunity. Yeah, you get to go hunt once in a lifetime. Your odds of killing one are probably slim to none. But just like Dumb and Dumber, you're telling me, hey, there's a chance. So hopefully that's the way we go back to. Thank you.
Thanks, Troy. No other comments? All right, comments from the RAC. Oh, come on up, Kevin. Yeah.
Kevin Albrecht. I really appreciated Troy's comments, and I wanted to comment to that. I had the opportunity to sit on the wildlife board during that time when the Archery Association was asking for those once-in-a-lifetime tags, and I was on there during the 3 go-rounds, 3 different years when they come and ask for that. And the first 2 times I voted no, and the hesitation that I had was you had so many people that had waited that many years, and we were going to take tags out of that pool, and we were going to give it to a pool that took a lot less points. And I had a real hard time with telling those guys, hey, you've waited 30 years. We're going to take your tag and give it to someone that's only going to take 10. And I remember being asked, what would it take for you to pass that? And for me, it was to have some public support. And that group went around and asked through the public and got that support. And that 3rd year it come through, that's why I voted for it. But I too, just like Troy, if there's going to be a change made to that and those tags in one way or another go away, I feel like those need to go back into the pool like they were originally taken, so that they are for those guys that have waited the longest. That it's not just now we've taken those tags and we can make it an easier route for somebody to draw a tag. I don't think that's what was represented to the wildlife board when it was originally passed. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, we'll move to the RAC for comments.
I guess I need to ask a question. Maybe one of the people that commented, or we get some. Did I miss something in the RAC packet? Are we proposing some big change to archery permits or seasons or something like that? Or are you guys alluding to something in the future? So I'm looking. Is there something we're talking about today, or is this a little pregame right here?
Business as usual, but I think it's come up at a couple racks.
All
Yeah,
right,
it came
that's
up
good.
last night
Okay,
in the
that's
Southern
good.
Rack. Am I representing that accurately? Yeah.
Okay.
Can you maybe elaborate on, I'm not sure if this started in the Central RAC, but I did see a comment from the Utah Archery Association recommending an additional tag. There, can you?
Yeah, the Utah Archery Association and the Central RAC felt like with the increases to Book Cliff's bison, to most of those hunts, we weren't recommending any corresponding increases on the archery hunt. So they made a motion to increase the Book Cliffs Bitter Creek archery by 1 permit, so going from 5 to 6. And then the northern region made a motion to increase both the Little Creek South and the Bitter Creek archery by 1 permit. So that was the motion made by that originated. with
Those
Utah
motions,
Archery
were they
Association.
taking them away from the rifle increases?
They were just additional. And I've talked to the biologist and we're flexible enough there that that's totally fine.
Thanks.
Do you want to speak to the success rate on the archery right now on the Book Cliff?
Yeah, both of those hunts in the Book Cliffs were 100% success.
Last year or
Last-
3-year average?
Last year, I'd have to rack my brain on what the previous couple of years. I think they're traditionally just pretty high, and sometimes they're higher than some of the corresponding any legal weapon hunts.
Okay.
And so that was the reason for increasing the any legal weapon hunts, but not the archery.
Thank you.
We'll take any other comments from the RAC.
I guess I'll make one more, only because of the comments that were made. So again, this is just one guy's opinion, but for me personally, I'm pretty cautious about how I talk about our point programs in Utah. I think it needs to be really clear that they are nothing more or less than a Ponzi scheme. They are a pyramid scheme, and the people at the top are the ones that have benefited, and all of us at the bottom are getting pooped on from the top. There's nothing, and it's not just Utah, it's any state that runs a point program. There are a very select few individuals that benefit from it, and everyone else gets crapped on. Okay. The other thing I think it's really important about a point program is you got to understand is like the states are selling you nothing. You get no guarantee. You get to buy a product for the way the rules are written for today, and you are guaranteed nothing for the future. And we could sit here for an hour and pull out example of example of example when just Utah has changed the point game, whether it's as simple as general seasoned deer, dedicated hunter, or all the way up through how many times we've gone through elk. So I do get really uncomfortable when we talk about just because I've been paying a $10 permit fee for 30 years that I am entitled to something. You are entitled for the product I'm selling today at the same rules that we all get to get in the game for. And if the state or the legislature decides to change the rules tomorrow, you were promised nothing. And so I'm just a little, again, one guy's opinion, I'm a little cautious on how we talk about points and where things go. And I appreciate that the Wildlife Board were trying to take things into consideration when it comes to once in a lifetime species. But again, one guy's opinion, any person that's willing to pick up a bow and throw the dice on their once in a lifetime chance with a bow, kudos to them. You're braver than me, which isn't saying a lot, but you are much braver than I am, because I don't have the gumption to risk that. So if they want to get in front of the line because they're willing to take a higher risk, go ahead. And if the Wildlife Board feels like that the risk should be really high in order to offer those hunts, then that's the Wildlife Board job to choose. But I don't feel that way. Going out with a bow or a rifle is risk enough.
I suppose now would be a bad time to introduce our Madoff bonus point system that we're going to roll out.
It would be a bad time, yeah.
That was a joke for everyone listening online. I don't want to see those public comments. No, I appreciate your comments, Cashin. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Just to Cash, do you propose anything better?
Nope. I was like, let's accept it for what it is, though.
Right.
Anybody online have any comments? All right, if not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve as presented.
And I will second.
Motion by Cash, second by Matt. Those that are here in favor, raise your hand. And no opposed. And then those online, let's start with Daniel,
Yes.
Jake,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rusty. Okay, on to bull elk permit recommendations. Mike Wardle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll take any questions.
Do you have any items of clarification or anything you want to add?
No, not really. Well, maybe one item is just to remind folks the 20% threshold rule only applies to deer. So for elk, that's not applicable here. Thanks.
Questions from the rack? Steve, go ahead.
I was just curious, what you've learned from these mid-season hunts on the limited entry units, these October hunts. Any big insights, anything that surprised you from starting those?
I don't know if there's been anything overly surprising. We've had a lot of public feedback that they can be difficult due to hunting with, spike hunters and other people on the landscape. We've received that feedback a lot. To be fair, that was kind of the whole point of the mid-season hunt. On a lot of the units, success rates are a little bit lower. On units where we're managing for older age class bulls and there's more mature bulls on the landscape, success rates are similar to our other rifle hunts. But you see a bigger disparity on these units where we're managing for lower age class bulls. There's typically a bigger gap between the mid-season rifle and say the early rifle hunt on success rate.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
We voted a while back to have reclass by the age class on some of these units. When do you think, what time period do you think that we'll start to see those units readjust to mimic the age classes that we've decided in the elk plan?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's tough to answer because it varies a lot by each unit. Some of the units, it's happening rather quickly. Others, not so much. Like if you look at the beaver, for example, I'll speak to that because I'm very familiar with it. The beaver is still, at an average age of 3-year average of 9.4, and it's supposed to be a 6.5 to 7. And we've continued to increase. Just about 6 or 7 years ago, we were at like 38 permits. Now we're recommending 100 permits this year. And we're still at that upper age class. And a lot of that on the beaver has to do with what our population was like 7 to 12 years ago. We were at a higher population on the mountain. We were over objective, had a lot more cows, putting a lot more calves on the ground. And so in those older age cohorts, we have more bulls on the landscape, if that makes sense. And then we got real aggressive with cow permits around 2018, 2019, and brought those numbers down. And so we had fewer calves hitting the ground, and we saw dips in success rate of spike hunters. And so there's fewer bulls on the landscape in those younger age cohorts, which is part of the reason why that age has stayed high, is because there's more older bulls available on the landscape than younger bulls, if that makes sense. So I guess the answer is it's complex, and it's going to take a while. It doesn't happen overnight. That's managing based on average age. It's more of a long-term trend that you're looking at. It's not year to year as much as like the buck-doe ratio management. But yeah, I think we're moving towards that on most of our units. Do you have one in particular you want to look at?
No, I just am curious about it because we made that decision, but also just you talking there makes me think what we're going to do is we're going to increase these tags, and then eventually we're going to see a swing shift where we hit that objective, that age class objective. And like you said, there weren't as many cows on the landscape. So we'll probably see a pretty significant cut in some of those limited entry units. I just bracing myself on the rack to make those cuts when it's time to make them.
Yeah. I mean, the Wasatch is a good example of that. The Wasatch, we made some big increases over the years. And then the last couple of years, we've made big cuts to try and, because we're below the age objective and trying to get it back up. So yeah, it is a possibility in the future.
Yeah, Charles, I hope you're on the limited entry elk train right now in this state and not the limited entry deer like me, because now is the time to get on the train. They are handing them out.
I'm on a 5-year waiting period right now.
I got a question. So for our elk plan that we've had implemented for a few years now, when is the division anticipating a mid-plan review?
This summer, we're going to put a committee together and that will come before the RAC and board this fall.
Okay, great. I've advocated for this before, but we keep getting new big game coordinator. So I'll advocate for you. As part of that mid-plan review, I personally would like to hear at least a slide, if not a couple slides, about multi-season for any bowl. We made adjustments. Those decisions were made for whatever reason to make those adjustments. I'd like to see if those decisions were valid or the reasonings behind them were valid, or is that something that can come back? And I know it was a very hot topic on the elk committee, but it didn't come out of the committee, but the change was still made, even though we didn't really get to talk about it a lot on the RAC. So I would love to see some discussion about multi-season permits for any bowl as part of that mid-plan review.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, Cash. I've actually heard that at each RAC so far, and it's on the docket to be discussed. I think that's something I for sure want to see discussed at the committee.
Great, thank you.
Do you have any concerns about the Nebo becoming the next Wasatch as far as big swings in age class and tag cuts, tag raises?
Yeah, it's a good question. The Nebo it's a big increase this year. Our biologists there did a flight this year, and they're over the objective. They actually counted, let me make sure I get this right. They physically counted 380 bulls. So when you include sitability, there's probably 500 to 600 bulls on that unit. They recently had a big fire. So the population's been climbing. And I don't know that it's a huge concern, I guess. Really, the whole idea is to harvest the bulls while we have them, right? And if that age objective dips in the future, then we adjust and we adapt and we cut those permits back. The Nebo, I'm not concerned about the recommendation. When you look back at like 2010, they had about 1,100 elk on the mountain and they were issuing 144 permits. Now they're over 2,000 elk and well over 2,000 elk, and they're issuing about that same amount. So it's not unprecedented on the unit. Actually, they're less than that. They're recommending 128. So it's not unprecedented. We have more elk now than we did then. And like I say, with a big fire, that changes things for elk too. Oftentimes, you see the herd grow. They have a lot better nutrition available to them in the summer months. You can actually see an increase in bulls being born rather than cows in your calves. You can throw more bulls in the population and you'll see the bull cow ratio climbing. I think on that flight, they were at like 56 bulls per 100 cows, which is pretty high. So plenty of bulls there.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question specifically about the manti? And so, you mentioned the Wasatch a little bit, and I think we saw the division, we built those permits up, and it seems like we went and found the end of the rope, and then, which is great. And then over the last few years, we've been dialing back down. Do we feel like we're finding the end of the rope on the manti? And that's why, just looking at where we're at on our 3-year average and what came in last year, do we kind of feel like we found the end of that and we're going to start trimming back down, or what are the thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll let Brad speak to it. While he's coming up, I'll give you just average age this year was 5.8. So it's within that objective, but it's trending down. Right? It's been at 6.36 and then 5.8.
I'm a short guy. Yeah, I think you explained it rather well. We're just trying to get in front of it.
Yep.
Looks like the trend is down. We want to be a year ahead of it instead of dropping below that 3-year average age next year. So we feel somewhere permit numbers over the last couple of years was probably the stable number, and just trying to be ahead of it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? I have a couple questions. If not, is it mandatory to submit teeth for age data?
So every limited entry hunter gets an envelope, but it's not mandatory for a tooth submission. They do have mandatory harvest reporting, but it's not mandatory to submit a tooth. But we still get good numbers. A lot of our units are well over 60 to 70% of return on those teeth. So we've never felt like it was an issue to where we needed to make it mandatory. We've always felt like we had a sufficient sample.
Has there ever been any concern that somebody kills a young bull, they don't care to find out how old it is because they know it's young, so they don't submit the teeth?
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. I don't know that it's been a huge concern for us just because we've still seen lower age bulls in the raw data. We actually caught some individuals a few years ago that were submitting spike teeth in an effort to lower the age objective so that we would cut permits. So, so yeah, you never know what you're going to get. I don't think that happens very often though. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the RAC? Questions from the audience? All right, do we have any online comments or survey data?
Again, one response, and they somewhat agree with the recommendations.
All right, any comment cards? One from Troy.
Troy Justinson, Sportsman, Fish and Wildlife. Cash, I share your same sentiments on points. And it's coming from a guy that's sitting on 28 deer points. The state owes me nothing. You know, it's my choice. I'm just kind of a sick, sadistic person that wants to be the highest point holder in the state without being able to hunt deer. So anyway, as far as the elk go, we support the recommendations with one exception, like Matt brought out. We have our Nephi chapters a little concerned with the number of permits on the Nebo. Originally, they wanted just to stay with the same permit numbers as last year, but last night I was kind of presented that maybe we meet a halfway mark. I think it's a 40% increase. Maybe if we cut it back to 20, but that would only be our only recommendation. And the basis of that is trophy quality. What they're recommending falls within, you know, the age class, but that's strictly what they wanted to see. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Troy. Any others? Comments from the RAC?
So growing up on the Nebo unit, two of my bull tags have been on there. I've never been on the deer train. I've always been on the elk train. I initially, when I saw those numbers, I had some real concern about bumping them up that much, basically with my quote unquote local knowledge of the unit. As much as I hate to say it, I absolutely trust Wes with what he's putting out there. I've known him my whole life. He says it's good. I believe him, and I'm good giving him benefit of the doubt. Just my thoughts on that.
How come you hate to say it?
I would hate to admit that I believe a biologist.
Any comments from you guys online? All right.
Sorry, I guess I will make just one comment that it's I'm supposed to be representing the public at large, and I did have a few people reach out to me, and I'll just throw this out as something for the division to ponder a little bit, because I really appreciate what we talked about with once in a lifetime, that some structure of how we did our permit allocations made it so that there were more bonus permits available to non-residents. And I did have some non-residents reach out to me now that, you know, over the years, as Utah, as we have swung towards offering the number of hunts that we offer for elk now. For me, when I'm always running like all my data, I love doing pronghorn because I got 3 seasons to worry about, and I hate doing elk because I have a gajillion seasons to worry about now. And I think the point is, you know, we do these overall tag allocations for the unit as a whole, and then we're spreading them out over all these hunts. And then the non-residents end up with very few bonus permits on their side of the line. And so it makes it really hard for them to draw. So again, even as much as I hate the draw system as it is, if we are going to live with it, maybe that's something that we could take into consideration, that, you know, we spread our tags so thin now because we have so many hunts to spread them across. It's making that bonus permit allocation tougher for our non-residents instead of them being all in one pool. So there's more available and more people can draw it. And so I'm not necessarily recommending any changes, but just something for the division considers as they're choosing what to put where. And I know we have a management pledge that says what we have to do, but if there's any way we can flex or bend to give a few more non-residents, a few more bonus tags, I'm a big believer in that. And, you know, the same reason I advocate that I would love to see at least 2 permits for every CWMU go to the public. So again, there's at least 1 in the bonus pool, right? For people who do have a lot of points. So yeah, if I throw that to the division to consider going forward, maybe even part of mid-plan review or something like that, can we move a few more permits around so that non-residents get a few more in the bonus round? So
How big of a problem is that with elk?
I think it's pretty ugly.
I mean, it seems, are there a lot of units that make it to where given 10% out would be not doable, like on the once in a lifetime?
Yeah, I mean, we could, it just complicates it, but it could be something we can look at. Really, probably, I think the biggest complaint we get is on the early rifle, at least from what I hear. Since the last change in the statewide plan, fewer permits go to that early rifle hunt, and that's severely limited how many non-resident permits there are. So a lot of those are just 1 permit, so they're not getting an option at that bonus permit. So yeah, that's a fair criticism. I think it's something we can look at.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Any other comments from the RAC? I guess I do have one comment, and this is just, I probably ought to repeat what I hear the other sportsmen in my neck of the woods saying, but there is a lot of concern of trophy quality going down, where the age objective is kind of a long-term game. I just hope that we're not increasing so quickly that we're, you know, like maybe just doing it too quick. If it is a long-term game, do we need to slow it down a little bit on certain units? With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second that.
So motion to approve as presented by Matt and a second by Tricia. Those that are here in person. Oh, all right. And those online, let's start with Daniel.
Yes.
Jake,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, on to pronghorn permit recommendations. Come on back up, Mike.
Apologize if you guys are sick of hearing my voice yet. I know I am, so I don't have anything to add. I'll take any questions though.
Any questions from the RAC?
I'll ask a question. Can you help me understand? So I feel like for all of our other presentations, we got some tables in the slide, and don't get me wrong, I reviewed the RAC packet. I love the RAC packet because I can go and see the hard numbers and I don't have to sort through a slideshow to get it. But I felt like pronghorn was the only one where we actually didn't end up with tables in the slide deck. And I was just wondering if you wanted to speak to that at all.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
The honest truth is just that we typically don't have a lot of question YouTube videos of me talking. So I was trying to simplify and shorten, but that's the main reason why. But I'm happy to pull up any information too. If
No,
you have
I'm
questions.
happy to. I think for some people, the presentation's actually easier for them. Your 7-minute video is better, and even if they, even if you're going through them kind of quick, you know, here it is. So just let you look at, pause the video if you need, type of thing. I think it's really helpful for them. I like going through the RAC packet, but I think there's other people that get lost in the RAC packet.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just I think pronghorners, and I agree with you. Most people don't care about pronghorn. I get it. I think pronghorn are just worth as much of their time as anything else. So let's just have the slide deck for people to review. You know, that's my only thought.
Yeah. That's good feedback. I appreciate that.
I care about pronghorn.
Oh, good.
All right. Population, is that a model or is that a flight count?
Flight count. We do survey flights for pronghorn. And I should say we do model in between years, so we don't fly every year. And the model is kind of similar to what I explained about deer. We're looking at buck-doe ratio and herd composition. We don't have as good as survival data, but we're starting to get there. We're getting more pronghorn collars out and getting better information on that.
Any other questions from the RAC? Questions from the audience? And we'll go to online comments and survey.
One person responded and they strongly agree with the recommendation.
All right, thanks. Any comment cards? Comments from the audience?
No one cares about prom.
I'm like, did I miss one? All right. Okay, comments from the RAC.
Yeah, I'll make one. I think no comment cards, living proof, right? No one cares about prom. Yeah, no, I just want to say, I really appreciate the division, changing that concept about managing for an age class for pronghorn. I find it awesome how many buck pronghorn tags we're able to distribute out to hunters these days. And in my experience with the herds and everything, I think it's been great. I'm sure there's some big trophy out hunters out there who would disagree, but I think for what Utah actually has to offer when it comes to pronghorn quality and the amount of opportunity we're able to give out is great. And it's so nice to have at least one limited entry hunt in the state where I don't have to have a 15-year plan to draw a tag. So I really like what the state's doing when it comes to the management of our pronghorn.
Any other comments? Can you let the record show that Matt does care about pronghorn?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good.
We'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the division's recommendation.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Brad and a second by Cash. Those in favor? Brad, did you raise your hand? Okay, great. I assumed since you made the motion. And then those online, Daniel,
Yes.
Jake,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
and Steve.
Yep.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, on to agenda item number 9. Antler. Antlerless permit recommendations. Mike again.
Yep. I'm happy to take any questions.
I know moose have been a hot topic on the antlerless. Any update over the last few days on that?
Just, we've been keeping a running tally of just opportunistic moose mortalities that we're observing on the Wasatch. And that RAC meeting last week in the central region, we were at 28 and we've picked up a couple more since then. So now we're at 30. And these aren't anything scientific. They don't, demonstrate a percentage of total moose or anything. It's just reports that we get. So it seems to be slowing down. There's a seasonality to it, and those ticks should be dropping off soon. And we hope that we'll have a lot higher success or survival rates through the summer. So,
I guess if you knew when proposals came out, what you know now as far as the mortality the last few weeks, would it have been the same proposal?
probably not. I've asked the biologists that, and they felt like, yeah, they probably would have preferred to keep it on the books, but probably would have reduced that recommendation from 5 to 2 or something. The Central RAC did make a motion to take it out altogether, but that was the only RAC that did that. So our preference, I think we're fine with reducing those permit numbers, just to exercise some caution. I can understand the sentiment of wanting to hang on to females right now until we see the extent of all this. But we would like to keep the hunt on the books just because sometimes it's a fight to get it back, and I worry that if it goes away altogether, we may not get it back. So.
Any other questions from the RAC?
Can I ask a question just about statewide success rate for antlerless elk this year? Did you guys feel like it was down because of the poor winter? Did it hold just fine? What were the thoughts on that?
I can pull it up and look at it. I don't remember noticing anything crazy or different. But I can pull that up and look at it.
I guess just while you're looking, where I'm kind of going with this, when we've had really bad summers, the state has been willing to issue an additional quota of antlerless tags because they're like, it's not going to work out anyway. I'm wondering if there's any thought process when we have the worst winter we've ever had, if there's any thought or like, no, that's good. That's actually what we're hoping. Any thoughts there? Any discussion about that at all?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought this up. It's come up in the other RACs, and I think it's important for especially for our federal land management agencies to hear, and permittees and others that are concerned about this, specifically with elk. A lot of our units, some of our units, we have ranges in the southern region where we try to keep elk towards the lower end of the range of the population objective during bad years and let them grow during the good years. This year, obviously, is shaping out to not be that great of a year. It's something we're really cognizant of. We're going to be in close communication with the BLM, with the Forest Service, and looking at that this summer, because we will be wondering in August, do we need to come back before the board and add additional permits to some of these cow hunts? Yeah, so it's something that's on our mind, something that we're going to be looking at during the summer. And I just about got success rates pulled up. So not really any noticeable changes at the statewide level. Yeah. Yeah, it's looking across all antlerless. We're around 30% success across all private lands only and draw tags too.
Any more comments from the RAC? Or sorry, questions from the RAC? Go ahead. So we got Charlie. I think Daniel might have chimed in too. Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, when you said comments, I got a comment, not a question, so I can wait for the comment period.
I got ahead of myself. Sorry about that.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Steve.
This is in full disclosure, this is about saving my marriage. I'm wondering about the deer in Monticello. We have some antlerless tags, and I guess we're seeing a lot of people that are complaining a lot. I guess my question, maybe for Ian, is there any concern with CWD issues with all the deer in town? Or I'd like to hear his thoughts on that. I'd like to see him up here. He's my neighbor. I'd like to make him uncomfortable.
Yeah, no pressure. You just got to save Steve's marriage.
Yeah, Steve and I share the same deer. Our neighbors, our yards touch. But yeah, I mean, CWD is kind of specific to urban environments. You got a lot of deer in a pretty small area, so it does seem to spread faster in urban areas, Moab, for example. But that being said, we haven't detected it in Monticello yet. We sampled every deer that we can get. Yeah, if it gets closer to town, there's going to be some concern there for sure. But as of right now, we haven't picked it up in town yet.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I got a question. Can the division talk about that Manti fair and lower escarpment elk hunts? I'm curious what the population of that herd that comes down is versus the number of tags they're recommending and the number of landowner tags they give.
Yep, Wade's coming up. What were your questions specifically about the permits or success rates? And I can
No, I'm curious, looks like there's 3 hunts recommended for this year with 36 permits. And on top of that, you give out a bunch of landowner permits. I'm just curious what the population of that herd that comes down is and how many permits you're given.
Yeah, Wade Paskin, biologist there. So that herd, it's yearly comes down into Farron 350 to 400 elk. It's substantial. It has an impact on the private landowners. There is a landowner mitigation permit association there that a few of the landowners are involved with. And as what those are is permits that they get where they can hunt on each other's private property, but that's as pretty much as far as they can hunt. This hunt is to these 3 hunts start in August, go into January, is to lower that population. The tolerance level of the landowners over the last 20 years have been incredible with fence damage and all the depredation that they've had over the years. They've had great tolerance level for those elk, but there's some that are starting to get pretty tired of it. So we're trying to get that population really lowered by adding these hunts. I can't recall how many permits were given to the landowners, but is what happens is those elk come down in the middle of the night and they leave quite early. It's hard for any of those landowner permits because they're tied to the private land to harvest. And they do get some way early in the morning, but in general, the elk come at night and leave practically before daylight. And so we give them pretty much as many permits as they can take, and that's just not very many. Usually they only want people that they know hunting on their property. They don't want to have people that they don't trust. So these hunts are to lower that population down. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess how low are you wanting that population to go? And I say that being someone that participates yearly with my wife and daughters having tags. And so
yeah,
I've personally never seen 300 head of elk in that unit at that time. So anyway, so I'm just curious what the division's goal is there. It looks like to me,
yeah,
the recommendation is to try to wipe them out.
The recommendation is not to wipe them out. There's how many total permits in that hunt is what was it? I think there's 60 permits right around there in those 3 hunts, and success, what is it? 40 each. So 120. The success rate is not going to be that great because the access, there's not a lot of guys that want to take horses and go for long hikes. In that country's pretty rough, and so success rate isn't all that high. So no, we can't afford to wipe them out. Those herds up there have a long tradition of families in the area hunting on the Manti, and so if we could get them. So if you don't manage to the tolerance level of the landowners, we're not going to have any elk coming down in the Farron. We'll have to remove that herd to really low numbers. And so if we could get them down by half, 3/4, that would be acceptable, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So that being said, Wade, I'll just comment because I'm in that area as well. So that's somewhat seasonal too. Some years it seems like there's a pretty good size herd there, and other years it's pretty limited, and it kind of depends on the climate as much as anything.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. You need to understand that there's not the winter range is so limited in that area. Those elk come down and they have the town of Farron, and then they have the elk fence. Between Highway 10 and the escarpment is a very narrow winter range, and a lot of it is just the Manco Shale with very limited elk habitat. So they utilize the agricultural areas very heavily, and like I say, the landowners have been very good, but they're reaching a tolerance level that we would have to really go in and really remove a lot of elk if we don't get a handle on this. So that's, yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
With that in mind and some of the urban deer hunts, I go back to that question. Has the division looked at providing a list of landowners that would allow access when someone draws the tags, name, contact number, something along those lines?
Currently, no, we haven't. I know sometimes our local biologists get those phone calls and get asked, who can you direct me to? And it seems like that's worked out well, but we currently don't have like a formalized process where a landowner can put their information on our website or anything. I don't know if we'd have a lot of private landowners that want to do that. I think they probably already get enough phone calls, at least the ones we hear from, they get a lot of phone calls already. Yeah, we don't currently have a formalized process for that.
Suzanne Duke's phone number.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to add one thing to the Farron cow elk hunt. I think sometimes the purpose of these hunts isn't necessarily to kill elk. Sometimes it's to pressure them, and that could be the case here. Is that when you get a lot of hunters in one area, the elk are smart, and when they start seeing others drop, they tend to leave. So it's not necessarily wiping out the herd. Sometimes it's to pressure them too.
Any other questions from the RAC? Questions from the audience? Let's move to online comments.
One respondent strongly agreed with the recommendation.
All right, do we have any comment cards? Come on up, Troy.
Troy Justinson, Sports Fish and Wildlife. We support the recommendations as presented, with one exception, that being the Parkers. Our Ridgefield chapter would like to see 200 permits. I think it's recommended 250 is what it is. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Troy. Is that the only comment? Comments from the RAC?
Speaking of marriage issues, I would like to look at maybe dropping the cow moose numbers on the Wasatch. Just with some of the input we've got. I still have time to get her to change her mind on what outlaw hunt she put in for, so we'll be all right, I hope.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I kind of want to touch on, Cash touched on something earlier that we can't change. This is kind of something we can't change right now, but Cash brought up maybe re-looking at that multi-season elk hunt when it comes to antlerless, especially with our elk where we're over objective in a lot of units. It sounds like we got a 30% success rate. I think it would be a good stroke if and when possible to start looking at reopening harvesting of those antlerless elk while you have a permit for either a buck deer, spike bull, just more people on the landscape, more opportunities to harvest those. And I think it's more opportunity to meet some of the objectives that we have as harvesting antlerless species are how we meet those objectives.
Thanks,
Mr. Chair,
Charlie.
can I
Go
address
ahead.
that comment real quick?
Mhm.
I was just gonna, that is actually currently available still in the statewide plan. We call those the antlerless elk control units. So if there are units where you feel like that might be helpful, we ought to talk with our biologists and talk about maybe using that as an option.
So I guess that's news to me is we're still able to open up units to harvest antlerless elk, like we used to be able to during our buck deer season or our, regardless of if it falls during when you have that antlerless elk permit. That's correct. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, so there's currently 9 units that have antlerless elk control permits available. And it's the Chalk Creek, the Box Elder Grouse Creek, which is new this year, East Canyon, Henry Mountains, Camas, Morgan South Ridge, Ogden, Pine Valley, and Zion. So yeah, those permits make it so that if a hunter has a deer permit or some other type of big game permit, they can also purchase a cow tag and hunt during their season.
And that's not a separate permit than the one you would pull for antlerless elk permit. Like let's say I were to pull an antlerless elk permit on the LaSalle's as it is the station now. Somebody on Camas, if they were to put in for the same type of hunt, would have that ability that I wouldn't have on the LaSalle's, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so since the LaSalle's don't have the permits available, you wouldn't be able to do it there. But on the Camas, if somebody had a deer permit, they could also get this permit over the counter.
Okay. Yeah, I was unaware of that, but I would think that any of these units that were over objective, we should be looking at that. Maybe making recommendations to start making that a thing.
Thanks, Charlie. Any other comments from the RAC? Any motions?
I would make the motion, we accept as presented with the exception of the Wasatch antlerless moose and drop that tag number to 1, just to keep it on the books for the future.
I have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a second from Steve. Did you catch that? Okay, so let's do a individual call this time. Matt?
Yes.
Trish? Cash?
Yes.
Brad? Daniel?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Charlie?
No.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1. Any other motions?
I'd like to hear why Charlie didn't want to do it.
Yeah, Charlie, would you like to clarify the nay vote on that?
Yeah, I just don't think we needed to add in the moose. I just didn't think that was necessary add in, but you guys did, so that's okay.
All right, thanks. All right, on to the next one. So excited, aren't you, Cash? 2026 CWMU antlerless permit recommendations.
I'd entertain a motion. Yeah.
Darren's all in already.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, so.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Darren. If do you have any
I don't
clarifications
know.
or anything you
I'm
want?
happy to answer questions. I'm sure Cash will have some.
Yeah, any questions for Darren?
Darren, I had to drum him up for this one. No,
You
I,
did?
I was just, could you speak to us a little bit about Deseret and why we're cutting permits on Deseret?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on there. One is that, as you know, that unit's been over objective. The actual population on Deseret is starting to approach kind of where the biologist and the CW would like to see, but we haven't had a recent flight. And so the recommendation is to, we still want, they're still going to have to do a maintenance take. And so we feel like they could do that with their 160 cow permits. But we're going to be keeping a close eye on what their overall harvest is with those. Bear in mind that, you know, on a unit that's over objective, they've done this in the past. So in the past, they had 425 permits, but they actually took about 600 cow hunters out because you could buy a second antlerless tag, or if you had a buck or bull tag, you could buy an antlerless tag. So that's a lot of people to try to manage and get through. And in some cases, more is not better. And so we sat down with them, and we felt comfortable landing about 360. So going from 425 down to 360.
Are they still going to give the option to be able to double up, or are we're getting rid of the double up and going down to?
No, they're still going to do that, and that's why we're going to keep a close eye on what the actual harvest is. So that they still need to. I mean, even if they're maintaining it, 2,500 head, that's still a lot of elk they've got to kill every year in order to just stay where they want to be. So, and we should be able to. This year we were going to fly it, but obviously conditions weren't great. So the plan is to fly it this winter and then get an actual estimate of how many elk are out there.
So again, sorry, I just want to make sure it's clear. So they're going to still offer the double permits if they want this year?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, they'll still keep doing it.
Thanks, Darren.
I know.
Nobody's jumping up here at the table. Any of you guys have comments questions online? Any questions from the audience? And it looks like we had one online comment. That was one person strongly agreed with the recommendations. Any comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to comments from the RAC. I can't tell if Cash is just giving everyone else a chance or.
No, man, this is the public's half. Well, sorry, or whatever you want to look at it. It's the public's interest, so you might as well vote it through. Right, contract's already written, so go for it.
Any comments from you guys online? If not, then we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass as presented.
Motion from Cash and a second from Trish. Those who are here present. Everybody voted aye. Those online, Daniel?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, on to the last item on the agenda, aquatic rule amendments for R 657-3C and R 657-59A. Sorry. Okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm filling in for Randy this evening. My name is Trina Hedrick. I am the Coldwater Sportfish Coordinator. Before you discuss our aquatics rule proposal, I just wanted to briefly touch on how we developed this proposal and why the proposed changes are a win for our private aquaculture partners. We didn't build this proposal in a vacuum. Over the last 6 months, we've been in regular contact with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, including 3 separate meetings and multiple phone calls, emails, and text messages. We kept UDAF informed about changes in our rule language as the rule was being developed. They did ask a lot of questions about the process for purging New Zealand mud snails from fish prior to stocking, but any concerns they had about our actual rule proposal were not expressed during these conversations. In addition, the DWR presented the rule change to Utah's private fish producers in January to a positive response. We specifically engaged with the one fish producer who has New Zealand mud snails. We answered questions he had, invited him to participate in the development of the rule with no response. We also responded to his request to set up meetings for additional discussions, but he just never responded to confirm dates for those meetings. Ultimately, the goal of this proposal is to balance industry needs with the protection of Utah's fisheries and native resources. New Zealand mud snails reproduce asexually, so it only takes one stray snail to start a new population. Currently, if the hatchery has these snails, they have to purge every single load of fish before stocking, which as you can imagine is pretty labor intensive. We think our proposal moves to a common sense, case-by-case approach that provides additional opportunities for the private aquaculture industry while protecting native wildlife species. In the vast majority of cases under our proposal will allow stocking without purging. We would require purging in situations where the stocking could potentially impact native spring snails. And under this proposal, there are situations where we may deny a certificate of registration. Those would likely be rare, and would be limited to scenarios where the stocking poses an extremely high risk to our native spring snails. Our proposal provides critical mechanisms that will protect our native spring snails, many of which have actually been petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act. And the main reason that they've not been listed so far is because there are safeguards in place that prevent New Zealand mud snails from invading their habitat. So our proposal keeps those essential safeguards in place, which should help prevent a federal listing. If they were to ever be listed, it would be problematic for private growers, landowners, and it could even impact our public fisheries. This proposal also helps open doors. Arizona has restricted the import of fish from growers that have New Zealand mud snails, but they've indicated that they'd be willing to adopt regulations similar to what we're proposing tonight, thereby paving the way for local producers to get back into that market. It should be noted that under our proposal, all stocking by growers that have New Zealand mud snails would require a certificate of registration. The pond owners themselves request these certificates, so the proposal does not add burden to the actual fish growers. And we currently use the certificate of registration review process to protect our native cutthroat. So we have examples of where we can use this process. We protect native cutthroat while still allowing some stocking of non-native trout for sport fish purposes, typically with mitigation measures in place to help protect cutthroat. And we just plan to adapt this process to the needs of our native spring snails. The bottom line is that our proposal would allow private fish growers that have New Zealand mud snails to avoid the labor-intensive purging process for the majority of their sales in the state while maintaining safeguards that protect Utah's native spring snails. Lastly, we're proposing one additional amendment to Administrative Rule R657-3C, subsection 9, and that's not actually in the RAC packet. Currently, as proposed, rule prohibits any water discharge from facilities that hold fish. However, this requirement is technically impractical, as most hatcheries and ponds are designed to discharge water as a standard part of their operation. So to address this, we're proposing to update the language in subsection 9, part 3B to state that all effluent from holding tanks must be managed to eliminate the potential for discharge into public waters. Private ponds, licensed aquaculture facilities, and licensed fee fishing facilities are exempt from this requirement. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thanks for all that information, Trina. Appreciate it. Charlie, go ahead.
Hey, so I'm kind of interested in this planning for future changes to Rule 657-59. It says you're going to finalize new Upper Colorado Basin non-native stocking agreement. If you could talk a little bit about what that finalization, what are you finalizing in that? What's the plan to finalize in that?
So
And then-
sorry.
And then you've also proposed changes that may include opportunities to stock new species outside floodplains, so of the Colorado River Basin. So what's the floodplain, and then what species are you guys thinking about stocking?
So the floodplain is the 100-year floodplain, and that is pretty well defined. You know, USGS and mapping services have that pretty well defined. So we've taken a look at that floodplain and gone through just a practical approach with the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program. It is actually a revision. These non-native stocking rules have been in place for many years. We just needed a better process. So folks within the Division of Wildlife have been engaging with the recovery program and the state partners to improve that process. And I guess I don't have a ton of specifics, but Randy Opplinger is on. He's actually participated in that process, and maybe he could provide some more of those specifics about what species or changes we'll actually see and when that would be approved.
Yeah, no, I could chime in on that. That's a great question. So as Trina alluded to, this is a multi-state agreement. So Colorado, Wyoming, Utah are the partners, and we work with the Fish and Wildlife Service. And really what this is intended to do is prevent non-native fish species that are impactful to our federally listed fishes that are in the Colorado River drainage from getting into the drainage and impacting those fish that we're trying to recover. The agreement itself is, I think, from 2009, so it's definitely an older agreement, and it's time to update. Really, the specifics for it, we're not really proposing changes per se in the species. It would be allowed in the basin, but what it does is it opens up additional opportunities to stock. It formerly was extremely restrictive in terms of what could be stocked, and our take on it is there are situations where fish just could not escape from a pond. You know, we're talking, you know, a pond that has like no inlet and no outlet, and stocking wasn't allowed in that pond. And because we didn't see any chance that those fish could ever get out of that pond, we were looking for ways to expand opportunities to stock some of those fish into those ponds. So that's really the change that we're talking about. We're not going to let species that are going to be potentially be impactful be stocked into areas where they might escape, but it's going to open up opportunities outside of those areas where there is no escapement risk to stock in some additional species.
Okay, that's exciting. I mean, it's exciting to me, one, because it has been really restrictive, but also just to get more breadth of species here in Utah, I think would be well appreciated amongst anglers. So I was excited to see it.
Any other questions? Questions from the audience? Do we have any comments on this one?
No comments, but they, one person filled out a survey and they strongly agree with the recommendation.
All right, do we have any comments from the audience?
I guess not.
No comments, all right. Comments from the RAC.
I hate to say how much I've learned about mud snails in the last couple of weeks. But I kind of looked at this as the quagga mussel issue as well. I appreciate the work that you're taking to get ahead of it before it becomes a big issue that we're dumping millions of dollars into year after year. So kudos to you guys for keeping this on your radar. We're just not on most of ours.
Any more comments from the RAC? Seeing none, we will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Motion from Matt and a second from Brad to approve as presented. All in favor? Everybody here's aye. Online, Daniel?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
All right. And I think that's it. So unless there's anything else, does anybody have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
All right. Meeting's adjourned.